Hello friends, today we are geeking out on the top 10 board games I played in 2024. Everybody's been doing their top 10 lists for the year and I want to do my own list. I've never done my own list, so you can take this as my personal top 10 games in 2024 regardless of the year, as long as I play them in the last 12 months. And that's all that matters, right? If I had fun playing them in the last 12 months, then it must be a good game. And if I didn't have fun playing them in the last 12 months, then they don't deserve to be on the list. Just kidding. Now, why did I choose to do it this way? And I've been thinking about it. I've been wanting to do my personal top 10 games of all time, heck, even my top 100 of all time. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that over time, our tastes changed. And for you to say that something is in your personal top 10 or your personal top games, you have to keep on playing that game and then check within yourself, do I still enjoy this game? Maybe I didn't, maybe it was a bit less fun, or maybe you had a bit more fun with the game that you didn't enjoy before now that you played it with different group of people. And that's sort of the idea of just including the games that I played in the last 12 months in this list. If it's something that was used to be in my top 10 games and I played it in the last 12 months and then I didn't have fun, guess what? I'm taking it out of my list. And then if it's a game, even if it's a really old game that I only played for the first time, didn't have to be released in 2024, and then I had fun playing that game, that's going on the list this year. I think that's a more productive way to do these top 10 lists, and I hope you enjoy. Let's go ahead and take a look at the list. Coming in at number 10 is Come Sail Away from Japanese publishers Sashi & Sashi, and designer of the same name Sashi, which he did in collaboration with Singapore designer Daryl Chow. So this is an Asian production through and through, and I'm very proud to have gotten a copy of this game sometime December last year, but I only got to play it really around the first quarter of 2024, and I primarily played it as a solo game. In Come Sail Away, you are in charge of a luxury liner, and you are trying to fill it up with passengers before going and sailing away. But the primary mechanic of the game is these passengers are quite picky and they want to go in very specific rooms and rooms with very specific requirements. So what happens is you lay out this ship as with a bunch of cards, with a bunch of room cards, and then you draw a bunch of these passenger cards, these really cute passenger cards, and this shows the order that the passengers want to come in. So there's going to be a yellow passenger coming in, and then another yellow passenger who has luggage, by the way. This means she has luggage, and then this red passenger is going to come in last. And what you want to do is put them one room after the other while fulfilling the requirements that the room wants you to put in, like what kind of color passenger you want to put in. So I've only played this as a solo game, but I really like it as a solo game. I think it's fun. It's a fun mancala mechanic wherein you are trying to put one passenger meeple at a time into one of the other rooms, and if you can't, there's a penalty, which is very common in these games. The multiplayer game is more of a drafting game, and I've never tried that, but I wanna do that at some point. But I think just as a solo game alone, Come Sail Away is my 10th best game that I played in 2024, and I highly recommend it. I think this is in between print runs right now, and eventually I hope you guys find a copy. I think it's the best Sashi & Sashi game I've played so far. Coming in at number 9 is Magic the Gathering. Now, some people will say that Magic is not a board game. Now, I will tell you, of course it is. It even has an entry on Board Game Geek. It used to be the tradable card game, but over the years, there has been many more tradable card games that have gone into the market, and now Magic is just another tradable card games out of many. Now, is it a good card game still? And in my view, it still is. Specifically, Magic the Gathering booster draft. And that's the primary way I interact with Magic right now. And that's primary and the only way I interact with Magic right now. Now, many people say that the last 5 to 7 years of Magic the Gathering has been the golden age of booster draft. And I tend to agree with that because that was also around the same time I started to play Magic again, around the Kaladesh set. If you have a chance to once again try Magic the Gathering, I highly recommend it. I have been playing Booster Draft in the last 4 to 5 years. It's easy to download a digital version of Magic the Gathering right now with Magic the Gathering Arena, and I've been very fortunate to have a bunch of friends that I can call and put together a booster draft. Every quarter we meet up and we play the latest expansion. The latest gameplay of Magic the Gathering, specifically Booster Draft, reminds me a lot of the type of Magic that we used to play when we were just discovering it way back in the 90s or in the early 2000s, which was very casual kitchen table Magic. And that's the same kind of gameplay you will find if you do a Booster Draft right now. One of my favorite sets that came out in recent years was Bloomburrow, which is a set wherein there were these small animal critters representing the denizens of the plain of Bloomburrow. So there were rabbits, rats, toads, frogs, and mice battling it out in Bloomburrow. And I thought that was really cute and really fun. So I highly recommend, if you haven't taken a look at Magic the Gathering in a long time, take a look at Booster Draft. Maybe that just might be your jam. Coming in at number 8 is Earthborn Rangers. This is another 2023 release, late 2023, that I only really got to play most of in 2024. Earthborn Rangers is the maiden design of publisher Earthborn Games, and if you're familiar with their roster of designers, you will see a lot of familiar names that formerly were working with Fantasy Flight Games. In fact, if you look at and play Earthborn Rangers, you will see a lot of DNA being shared with Living Card Games or LCGs such as Arkham Horror and the Marvel game. In fact, I will go as far and say as this is a LCG just from a different publisher. But it's the same designers and it feels and plays like an LCG. The theme is quite different though. Just like Marvel and Arkham Horror LCG, this is a co-op game that you can also play solo, and that's primarily how I played it this year, as a solo game. The theme of Earthborn Rangers is set way far into the future where, surprise, humanity has effed up the Earth, and we've sort of sent back the Earth to a technological stone age, and we are now relying on a mix of ranger skills to survive in the wilderness, plus any surviving modern technology that we use to sort of make sure we don't make the same mistakes we did before. What you're doing is you are going through missions, and as you go through your daily missions, which might be to deliver goods from one village to the other, and there's a map that comes in the game, an RPG-like map that you can use to go from one location to the other, and you can think of each location in this game as sort of a game. So when you get to a location, you get to play a game of Earthborn Rangers, and in between, as you travel between different locations, you will do sort of the upkeep phase of the game. And the map is sprawling. It's a big valley. There is lots of large mountains in the north. There's a part of the valley at the bottom where they say you should never go because that's where all the creepy crawlies of the valley are. And I really enjoyed Earthborn Rangers because unlike other games like Arkham Horror and Marvel, wherein the focus is combat against enemy monsters, what you're trying to do here is trying to interact with nature in a non-violent way. So there will be primarily fauna or animals and plants that you're trying to interact with, but not necessarily kill them, but more of try to move around, skirt around, and try to really respect them and their surroundings. It's very, very cool. The story is very, very compelling. My only con, I guess, is it can get a bit repetitive, but the story is quite compelling, but the gameplay can be quite repetitive. That's sort of my feedback to it. And I'm looking forward to going back to the game at some point and finishing the story. I also back the next campaign of Earthborn Ranger, so I probably should finish this game before that campaign finishes. So that's my number 8, Earthborn Rangers. My number 7 game is Vindication. Vindication is a game that we played, me and my friends, early in the year, and we really enjoyed it for what it is. It's sort of this exploration game on a map that's a mix of, I would say, worker placement, because as you explore the map, you do activate the tiles that you travel on. The whole theme of the game is you are this washed up convict or some nobody that is washed on the shores of this unknown island, and you are trying to travel the land in order to get vindicated. So a lot of the effects that you will see as you go through the island are all of these effects when you're trying to learn new skills, meet new allies, and sort of pick up new virtues so you can become a vindicated person. In fact, one of the mechanics of the game is you will eventually be able to flip your character card and be vindicated. But at the end of the day, this is really just a victory points game wherein you're trying to get the right mix of cards and abilities and build a sort of engine. It's a bit of tableau building also in order to generate the amount of points that you need. One of the interesting things about this game I remember now is this end game mechanism wherein you don't quite know when the game will end. Every time you hit a certain points milestone within the game, there are new endgame conditions that are revealed into the tableau. Eventually, the game will end, and whoever was able to best put together an engine and find the best combination of cards will win Vindication. We really like this one. It's very straightforward, and this is my number 7 for the year. So, it's a really good game, but I think there are also a lot of other really good games that I was able to play this game. But if you want to try Vindication, I highly recommend it. Boom! My number 6 game is the games are getting heavier. The King's Dilemma. The King's Dilemma is a game that I played with my friends in the early half of the year. It's a campaign game, it's a legacy game, and you need the same group of players to be playing it throughout. Unfortunately, one of my friends wasn't available anymore to finish the campaign, but we look forward to finishing the campaign in 2025. Now, a lot of players will argue, is the King's Dilemma even a game, or is it more like a leisurely activity with your friends? Now, people say this because there's a lot of role-playing elements that you need to do when you're playing King's Dilemma. The actual mechanisms of the game is really just a grandirized version of let's vote on something, right? As the game goes on and as you go through the campaign, you will be opening these packets, these envelopes, which will have a story beat or a make-believe problem that your kingdom is currently facing. You and your friends are playing one of the counselors in the vast kingdom that represents the story in the King's Dilemma. And you and your friends will have these secret objectives wherein you're trying to either increase the wealth of the country, reduce the education of the country, power up the military of the country, and many of the story beats will be trying to explain and vote on whether to increase or decrease those factors in the country. So it's really just managing a track collectively as a group. That's the game of the King's Dilemma. And if you treat it as that, it will become a very dry game. That's why I recommend, if you ever try to play the King's Dilemma, you should come into it knowing what you're getting into, which is basically a collective role-playing experience among you and your friends. The player who was winning in our game was, I'm not even sure why they were winning, but it can be a bit random, the game, and really the best parts of King's Dilemma is just the stories and the laughter that you will have with your friends as you go through the campaign. The story itself is very interesting. It can be a bit violent, it can be a bit like a bit of Games of Thronesy. So if you have a couple of friends who are into that kind of theme and who want to role play as Ned Stark or the Lannisters or the Baratheons or the Targaryens, then yes, this is probably the game for you. Just remember that the King's Dilemma is more of a role-playing experience rather than a gamer's game that you come in with a strategy and try to win every game of the campaign. The story itself is very good. I do enjoy it, and we look forward to eventually finishing the campaign. So that's the King's Dilemma. Alright, we are now halfway through the list, and my number 5 is another heavy game. Okay, it's Ticket to Ride Legends of the West. Now, am I gonna do the whole spiel while holding it like this? Maybe. I will challenge myself. So, Ticket to Ride Legends of the West is another, surprise, surprise, legacy game that I was able to play this year. And unlike the other legacy games that I mentioned, I was able to finish this one. I was able to finish the campaign, and I was able to finish the full 12 game campaign that is Ticket to Ride Legends of the West. Now, granted, we played it with 3 players, but this is a game that plays really well whether you play it with 2, 3, 4, and I don't know if it goes all the way to 5, but I think it plays really well. It does run a bit long, and it will take you, I think we took 3 sessions to finish it, and I think that's the best way to approach this when you go and do a legacy campaign. Try to finish it in as little sessions as possible. Ticket to Ride Legacy Legends of the West was at one time, when I played it in quarter 1 of 2024, a contender for my number 1 game of the year. So think about that. It is now number 5. So what are the other 4 mysterious games that suddenly beat Ticket to Ride Legends of the West? That being said, I think 5 onwards are all games that I think were worthy of the number 1 spot in any game in any year, and also in anybody's personal list of favorite games. So this one is an interesting take on Ticket to Ride. If you've already played that game before, you basically go through several games of Ticket to Ride, starting with a very small map that you put together. There's like jigsaw puzzles that you put together to start with a very small Ticket to Ride map. And as you go through the campaign, through the story of the campaign, which is this story where you're trying to chase, it's set in the Wild West, and you are trying to chase this outlaw businesswoman who is trying to establish illegal operations in Midwest America or across America. Eventually, you will be able to expand the map as you play Ticket to Ride Legends of the West. And every time, without spoiling anything, as you expand the map, new and new mechanisms do come out, and different ways to score points do come out. And I found it was very, very interesting. I tend to like Ticket to Ride already. I'm a Ticket to Ride fan. So playing variants of Ticket to Ride, a very well-made variant of Ticket to Ride, is right up my alley. So if you like Ticket to Ride, if you are looking for a legacy game that's pretty simple, anybody can pick up, you want to play it with your family, you want to play it with non-gamers, I do highly recommend Ticket to Ride Legends of the West. I enjoyed this one. I have very minor gripes with this one. I think my only minor gripe is how the eventually campaign winner is determined, but otherwise I think everything about this game is superb. I love Ticket to Ride Legends of the West, and I do recommend this one. Pick it up if you can. My number 4 game is something that I only played a couple of weeks ago. I think just last week actually, and I'm so confident that it is my number 4 game of the year. What game is this? Because I've played it before, but I've only played this version of the game last week, and that game is Dune Imperium Uprising. Now, if you who played the original Dune Imperium, you know that's one heck of a game. It's set in the Dune universe, it's set in Arrakis. You play as one of the great houses. You're either Atreides or Harkonnen, and you are trying to basically go through the same events as the movie, and or the book rather, we should say it's the book, right? And so there's a lot of controversy with this particular game because they say it's a bit of a cash grab, because the Dune Imperium game, first game that came out, they say this one is practically the same game, and I will say yes, it's probably the same game. And if you already have the original, I think unless you play this game a lot, and I mean a lot meaning every game night you bring it, it's probably not worth upgrading to Dune Imperium Uprising. That being said, I think this is the better, more smoothly designed between the two. My problem with the original Dune Imperium was it can be a bit swingy, and me and my friends do agree that the intrigue cards in the game and the way that scoring works in the original game can be a bit swingy. At least in the one game that we played of this one, it felt a bit more smooth. It wasn't as swingy, the scoring, and there seemed to be a lot more focus on the deck building elements of Dune Imperium. You can really deck build in this one. So yes, I'm just basing this on one game, but I'm fairly confident that Dune Imperium deserves a spot in my top 10, only because I remember really liking original Dune Imperium. And when I played this, as I said, if you play a game again in the last 12 months and you enjoy it again, then it deserves a space in your top games. And that was the case for Dune Imperium Uprising for me. I really should play this game a bit more. This is the smoother version. I have no doubt actually that if I had played this a bit more or a bit earlier in the year, this might be higher than 4. So this is actually a conservative 4 rating for Dune Imperium Uprising. My number 4 for 2024. It's time for the top 3. Now, my number 3 game wasn't even a game that was released in 2024. It was released way before that, but it's one heck of a game and a bit of a teach. That's why it did take a while for us, me and my friends, to learn the rules and find a big enough table to play this game. Now I can already hear some of the gamers saying, that's easy. This game is easy. We have big enough tables to play that. We play this outside. We play this inside small fast food stores. Whatever. My number 3 game is Ark Nova. I love Ark Nova. And again, as I was saying, at the start, we had a hard time learning this game and finding a big enough table to play this game. This was sitting on my shelf of shame for at least a year before I finally was able to play this with my friends in this year in 2024. Now, Ark Nova, I will say, now that I've played it, is worth all the hype. It can be a bit daunting and complex at the start, but once you do understand the rules, it's very easy. It's 5 different actions per turn, and the complexity is really in the cards that come, the big stack of cards that come in the game. Now, I don't think there's anything new I can say about the game other than yes, it is really good. It is quite enjoyable to figure out combos with your animal cards, with your the corporation cards or institution cards that come with the game, and then figure out an engine to make you win the game. I really enjoy it. I enjoy this a lot more actually than Terraforming Mars, which I think wouldn't really make my top 10 for reasons such as I think I just like this theme a bit more, and I think this plays a bit more smoothly for me. Now, if you haven't been paying attention, Ark Nova has actually climbed the ranks of the Board Game Geek Top 100 and is now ranked number 3, recently dethroning former number 1 Gloomhaven, and is now only behind Brass Birmingham, which is holding number 1 spot, and Pandemic Legacy Season 1, who is holding the number 2 spot. And I always knew, just looking at the scores, that Ark Nova was the only game in the last 5 years that had a real shot to become the number 1 on Board Game Geek. Not that that really matters on a whole deal, right? It's just great for ranking sake. All of these are great games, but it just shows what a nice and great game Ark Nova is. I highly recommend it. It's my number 3 though, matching Board Game Geek, but I have 2 other games that I just enjoyed a bit more this year, and that's my number 2 is another heavy game. And I'm kind of regretting doing this shtick, but I will do it again. And it is Dwellings. Let's put it in camera. There you go. Dwellings of Eldervale is my number 2. Now, this is a game, yes, that was not released in 2024. It was released in 2020, but it was a Kickstarter game and only available on the web stores usually of Breaking Games, which is the publisher. But it took me a while to find a copy of this game, and finally I got a copy. I shipped it here to the Philippines. Even took a bit longer to get my friends ready to play the game, but boy, when I finally got it on the table, it was an instant hit among my friends. Now, if you're not familiar, Dwellings of Eldervale is this mix of area control, worker placement. In fact, it reminds me a lot of the other game on my list, which is Vindication, but I think it just does that formula of game a bit better. This game called Dwellings of Eldervale. I think the idea of having all of these different cards that you can combo, and then the worker placement elements wherein you are trying to get resources on the board, get resources when you pull off workers off the board, and the different kind of meeples that you have, and then you also have all of these monsters, which are more of a nuisance rather than an actual scary thing on the board. All of those elements coming together make for Dwellings of Eldervale to be just really enjoyable soup of mechanics that, for some reason, if you think about it, it reminds you of different things, different games. It has a Blood Rage sort of battle in the middle mechanic. It has a Catan sort of mechanic wherein you're trying to get resources off the board, and it's very similar to Vindication, but once it brings everything together, it's just very enjoyable. I can't quite explain it, and it's just a very smooth game in how it comes together. Dwellings of Eldervale. Now, this is a game that got released in 2020, and there's a new version, or supposedly a 2.0 of Dwellings of Eldervale that has been released called Andromeda's Edge. And I bought that game. I haven't received it yet. It takes a while for games to get here in the Philippines, and probably a bit longer to get a group of people to play a game with me, or my friends specifically, because we are very busy people. But eventually, in 2025, we'll see if Dwellings of Eldervale retains the spot of number 2 or even the top 10 in my list once Andromeda's Edge comes in. And there's a couple of good games coming in. But despite that, Dwellings of Eldervale is still number 2. That means there's a number 1 on my list. And finally, coming in at number 1, if you made it this far into the video, thank you very much. I promise you my number 1 game is worth its while, and if you ever have a chance to play it, I wholeheartedly recommend it. It has been one of my best gaming experiences throughout my entire time in the hobby. Now, this is another game that wasn't released in 2024, but I only got to finish in 2024. It's another legacy game, so you can really already see that I do like these kinds of games. and it is another huge box game, and I'm beginning to regret having to put it on my shoulder every time I explain it. My number one game, personal top one game as of 2024 in all of the games I played in the last 12 months is Clank Legacy Acquisitions Incorporated. Whoa. Once again, it's not a game that was released in 2024. And honestly, I kind of like the mechanics of the top 10 list that I'm making right now, because if this was released in 2019, and if this is only valid for the top games in 2019, then that means you need to finish the game in its entirety, the campaign in 2019. Now, I know for some people, that's simply not possible, right? They don't have the luxury of coming back to the table with the same group of people playing a legacy game. Sometimes I've heard stories of people taking more than a year to finish a game, a legacy game, and that was the case for my experience with Clank Legacy Acquisition Inc. So I got this in 2019. I bought it off an online store. I started it with one of my best friends playing the game. We played a 2-player game, and we made it halfway through the campaign in 2019. And you know what happened at the end of 2019 and early 2020? COVID happened, and that resulted in us, me and my friend, not being able to finish that campaign, having to pause this campaign, and not really thinking if we could still finish this campaign given everything that happened. I did remember that back then when I played Clank Legacy, it was one of the best games I played. I really like Clank already. I like deck building, but one of the standout things that I really like with this legacy game is just the writing. There are many games, legacy games, where the writing can be one of the weaker parts of the game. It's not great. It's a bit like reading of like a very elementary type of writing. But these guys feel like they're sitcom writers. We were laughing out loud in my apartment while we were playing this game back in 2019, and I tell you, this is a very funny game, and hats off to the guys who designed Clank Legacy Acquisitions Incorporated. Now, we know eventually we did get back to normalcy, and finally me and my friend got together to finish our game of Clank Legacy this year. We finished the last 6 games, and it felt pretty crazy reopening a game that you started way back in 2019, going back to the same characters, to the same storylines that you sort of started with. It's a bit of nostalgia, and just a testament of how, if you have really good friends, a strong friendship, there's nothing that gets in the way. You just get right back into it and continue having fun. We finally finished the campaign. The campaign is sprawling. The campaign is great. The writing is great. Deck building is great. The surprises are great. All the twists and turns are great. Despite everything, there's got to be some cons, right? So my only con with Clank Legacy Acquisitions Incorporated, it's a pretty long game. We played 2-player, and we would regularly take almost 2 hours, but at the back end of the campaign, just to finish a game. And I think that's just not reasonable if you're trying to finish a campaign, finish a game, and just go through a campaign. That being said, it was one of the best gaming experiences I've had, and I highly recommend playing this. The last bit I would say is there's also Clank Legacy 2 that just got finished. It was kickstarted a couple of I think over a year now, and now it started shipping and getting to backers right now. If you have the opportunity to either get this game or Clank Legacy 2, I highly recommend it. I hope you have the opportunity to play one of the best board games out there. I know a legacy game is not for everybody. Not everybody has the opportunity to have a group of people and continue playing the same game with the same group of people coming together in several sessions. But if you do have it, I wholeheartedly recommend Clank Legacy Acquisitions Incorporated, my number one game of all time as of 2024. And the funny thing is, next year when I make this list, obviously this will be automatically falling off, right? By technicality, because of course I will not play another campaign of Clank Legacy next year, and I think that's fair. We should check and keep on playing new games and give other games a chance to claim the number one spot in my top 10 list. But as I said, there's a Clank Legacy 2 coming down the line, and who knows, maybe that's gonna be my number one next year. If you made it this far, thanks guys for watching. I really appreciate you taking the time to find out what my recommendations are and what are some of my favorite games. Thank you for watching. If you guys enjoyed this kind of video, please let me know in the comments down below. Did you disagree with any of my games? Are you curious with some of my games? Let me know in the comments down below. Let's have a conversation. If you enjoy the things I've been doing lately on the channel, please go ahead, like, subscribe. I do a bunch of things now. I'm just geeking out. That's the whole point of the channel, right? So I have board games, I have pop marts, I have toys, I have video games, I have travel, all of those things. So again, thanks guys for watching, and a happy new year.